Hey guys, this is Eric down at Lacrosse Archery, and today we're going to go over how to custom fletch your own arrows. So as more and more people join the archery market and community, we see more and more people that want to kind of custom build their arrows. And we can definitely custom fletch them down here at the shop for you, but a lot of people want to take that task and kind of do it themselves. So today we're going to go over how we would fletch an arrow here at the shop and teach you how you can fletch them at home. So at the front of the store, you're always going to find an arrow building station there. So we're going to sell fletchers, we're going to sell wraps, points, nocks, and then just various types of fletches as well. So everything that you need to kind of custom build your arrow exactly how you want it. But the pieces that we're going to use today include a Bitzenburger fletcher. So this fletcher is going to be one that's sold here at the store. It's kind of a universal fletcher. You can fletch anything from fat diameter target shafts to micro diameter hunting shafts on this fletcher. The one that we're going to have down here is going to be a right helical, but you can also purchase this in a straight clamp as well as a left helical clamp. So the majority of fletching is done in right helical, but if you wanted to do something like left helical or a slight right offset, you can get those clamps to do that as well. We're also going to need our fletches. So depending on what you want to do for your arrow build, there's going to be a variety of different fletchings available down here at the store. All of those will be displayed for you, so you can kind of pick those out as well. We're going to lay a wrap down on our arrow, and then we're going to need some cleaning solution, a green scrubby, a piece of paper towel, our trusty mouse pad. Ours is sponsored by Looney Tunes. Some cyanacrylate glue, which is just a fancy word for super glue, and then an Allen key, as well as our arrow. But as we get started with that, we're going to first prep our arrow. So we're going to lay a wrap down, and the advantage of a wrap on the back of an arrow has several different functions. So a wrap is something that's going to add a layer of visibility to your arrow. So there's a whole bunch of different colors out there. Today we're going to lay down a white. It also gives you a lot easier surface to read blood off of, because everybody's shooting those big bucks with wraps on them now. And then it also gives us a nice clean surface that we can drop those fletches onto. If we're starting with a bare shaft, ideally it's a perfect arrow. But if we're going to strip some fletches off your old arrows, we might get a little bit of carbon or some glue residue. And in that case, it's nice to have a nice clean surface to lay our fletch down onto. But before we lay that fletch, we want to prep our arrow. So first off, we're going to pull the nock out of the arrow here. Takes a little finger strength, or you can grab a Leatherman or pliers and just pull that out. From there, we're going to grab our green scrubby, and the back 4 inches to 5 inches of this arrow, we're just going to clean up. So this is a brand new arrow, so I don't necessarily have to do this, but if you just clean off the fletches from your own arrow, it's always going to be something that you're going to want to do. This just cleans up that shaft a little bit better. And then we're going to take our paper towel. We're going to get a little bit of our cleaning solution. Here I've just got rubbing alcohol. I get my paper towel wet, and you'll see that as I wipe the back of this arrow, we do have some carbon residue. So all of that is going to be something that would adhere poorly to a fletch. So we clean that all off, and then we're ready to lay our wrap. So that's where our mouse pad comes in handy. If I try to lay this fletch or this wrap down on a hard surface like a table or a piece of wood, what's going to happen is as I roll that arrow over the wrap there, it's going to get creases and folds and bumps and stuff that makes your arrow look aesthetically unpleasing and also makes that wrap kind of ineffective. So I'm going to take our wrap off here. They are all adhesive back from the factory. Sometimes you just have to find the right corner to peel them off. I'll peel that off and lay it down on our mouse pad. Once it's nice and flat, I'm going to take the back edge of our arrow and we're going to line that up on the back of the wrap here. So once I've got my 90 degree on the back and I can push it forward, then I'm just going to simply roll. Once I've rolled that, everything is on there nice and smooth. We can put our nock back into the arrow. Alright, so we have our fletch or our wrap laid down here. We're going to square up the back of that arrow with the back of that wrap, and as we press forward we get adherence to all of that arrow, and then we simply roll forward And our wrap is on. Nice and cleanly laid. We're right at the back of the arrow there. Depending on your arrow, we're fletching a Victory today. They might have something that says spinal line on them. So a spinal line is something that Victory does to their arrows, as well as some other companies on the market. That spinal line tells you kind of where the spine of that arrow should be. It's not a perfect thing, so if you really want to test them, you can get a spinal line machine and spine all of your arrows. But Victory fletches all of their arrows cocked vein opposite of that spine. So that's what we do down here at the store, and it's a really good starting place for you guys if you're starting to fletch your own arrows. We're going to drop our arrow into our Bitzenburger now, and in the back here we have a knock receiver. So I'm going to drop my knock in. I've got my label facing straight up, so when I put my clamp down, that's where my first fletch is going to lay. But as of right now, my clamp is not going to lay well with a fletch onto this arrow. So all Bitzenburgers have these two little dials over here. Those dials allow us to set each of our jigs to our amount of helical, our amount of offset, and everything else that we want to do with our arrow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust these to figure out how much helical I want on that arrow. That is simply done with our Allen tool here, which we'll get to in just a second. The next thing that we need to do is decide how far up we want this fletch to lay on our arrow. So today on our Bitzenburger here, the jig has multiple little lines on it, and those allow us to be repetitive with how far that fletch is up the arrow. We're going to go to our second big line. They alternate with a small line and a big line. So we're going to go 2 up on the arrow, and when we drop that onto our fletcher, we're kind of midway up into that wrap. So this is with a standard blazer, and from there we're going to adjust our 2 dials here so our fletch lays well. So I can unlock both of those, and from there each of these will rotate, and as they rotate, our fletcher goes back and forth on that arrow. So we can go really severe all the way over, or we can go pretty minimal, and if it's all the way over, it really doesn't sit very well. So we're going to be kind of in the middle there for our purposes today. So I'm going to set these up. So we got our bottom down, our top one we're going to adjust a little bit too, and check our fletch. So it's kind of like you're putting a fletch on just with no glue. So my fletch looks much better. We're going to lay on that arrow nice and smooth with just the amount of helical that we want. From there we're done with our mouse pad and everything else. We're going to apply the glue to our fletch. So there's a couple different ways that people like to do this. Some people will lay a straight line of glue down their fletch and then dab it off on their paper towel. This is a really good way if you have a problem with using excess glue. So if you find that you're always spilling glue off the side of the arrow, it's running down it as you lay that fletch, it's always nice to just dab a little bit of that excess off and then drop it onto our arrow. Personally, I like to use a series of dots of glue on the arrow, or on the fletch, and then just rub them together to coat that entire fletch. I find that I don't struggle with a lot of excess glue, and I find that I don't have to dab it off on a paper towel. The thing I don't like about that is a lot of times you dab off too much glue and then you don't have the vein adherence that you might like. So we want to make sure that there's glue all the way down that vein, and each of these veins has a little belly. We want to make sure that there's glue all the way into that belly and to the sides. So if you do have a little glue that comes out on the side, that's perfectly fine. We clean that up at the end. Today we're going to fletch 3 different fletchings though, and the only one that has a little different process is going to be an AE Max Stealth. So this is a really popular vein right now, but they do require to be prepped. So we have a primer pen here which just cleans the base of that shaft. There's a couple other veins on the market that require this. If you purchase some tack veins, a couple of the different models of AE Max, and then a couple other ones that are on the market, they'll all advise you to use a primer pen. And you really need to use this. If you do not, you can simply push over your fletch after it's dried and it'll peel right off. So these will be at the front of the store as well, but you only need them if you're going to fletch one of those veins that needs that process. So for our standard blazer, I'm just going to lay down our dots of glue, So I found kind of my magic number is 5 dots of glue, and then I simply take the tip of my glue bottle and rub those in, making sure that the entire fletch is covered. From there, I'm going to start at the back with my clamp. So I lay down at the back, and then I will just press forward onto that arrow. Now, you don't need to add any extra force or any extra pressure. As soon as that vein is down, there's enough magnetic force on this fletcher that it'll hold that clamp in place. All right, so the back of our clamp here has all of these little fletching marks, and this allows us to set those distances. So we're going to fletch on that second big line today. So we drop our fletch in, and we're going to line the back of that fletch up with that line there, and that gives us our starting point for where that arrow is going to align with that fletch. When we put on that glue, as I said, I do like the little 5 dots on this one. So I'm putting on my 5 dots and then just spreading that glue out on our fletch. And when I go to lay it, I'll start at the back here and press forward onto that clamp, and our fletch is laid. So I'm going to wait a couple seconds. If you're fletching multiple arrows and you've got multiple jigs, then often you're just going to go on to your next one, and as soon as you get back to the first, you're ready to go. But we're going to give this one about 15 seconds to dry, and this cyanacrylate that we sell down at the shop, or super glue, is a very quick 10 to 15 second adherent rate. So as soon as we're done, we're able to take that clamp off, and we're going to twist our knob here to go to our next arrow. So we're fletching 3 right now. We do have the capability to fletch 4 on here. It's a simple adjustment of a set screw at the bottom. So our next vein is going to be also from boning. This is what we call a mini X vein. It's 2.25 inches, so a little bit longer than our blazer, but fletches the same. So we're going to drop it back into our second big line on the clamp here, so that all of our bases start at the same point on that arrow. And we're going to go ahead and lay our glue down. Once again, I'm just going to do those 5 little dots and then run my tip down the arrow, or down the vein there, and spread out my glue. I lay it down from the back and press it forward. And now that one is ready to sit for its 15 seconds. So on our last one here, this AE Max, we're going to drop that into our clamp. We're going to open up our primer pen here, and this primer pen, we're just going to strike on a surface to get some of that primer fluid out. So if they sit for a while, or you notice that it's kind of running a little dry in your arrows, we just strike it softly, and this is actually kind of a plunger tip, so it'll go in, release some of that fluid to the tip, and make sure that we're nice and wet again, so that that actually cleans our base. So we'll take that off, go to our last position here, and just like our last one, we drop it into our second big line. And we're going to take our primer pen now, and we're simply going to wipe it from front to back on our fletch. So I go all the way to the front and all the way to the back. We can cap that then, and this is ready to fletch. So same thing, we're going to start with that same base point, but on this, because it's a slightly longer fletch, we're going to do 6 dots of glue. And you'll find kind of your certain amount of glue that you like to use. Everyone's is a little different, but this is what I found that works the best. So I spread all of that out, and then I can lay this fletch down. So this is going to have the same starting point on that arrow, but since it's longer, it's going to go much farther up our wrap. So this one almost gets to the front, so we might end up fletching that fletch style back just a little bit so that we're not so close to the front of our wrap. Setting that distance is really personal preference. A lot of people will set their fletches forward a little bit more if they end up having fletch contact on their face at full draw. If you move that fletch up the shaft, you take that element out of your shot. That's nice because it reduces our face pressure. So if we're pressing onto those fletchings at full draw, we're going to influence that arrow a little bit. So if we take that out of the equation, we should get a little bit better arrow flight. So we've laid all 3 veins on this arrow. So now we're simply going to clean up that arrow. So I do have a little bit of excess glue on here. which is perfectly normal and actually something that I'd like to see. If you don't have excess glue, you might be a perfect fletcher, but you also might not have enough glue. And if we don't have enough glue, we might struggle with that vein adhering and sticking on there on your newly fletched arrow. So kind of a funky looking arrow here, but for this purpose, this is when your Q-tips come in handy. Everyone's got them at home. If you don't, they're super cheap at any of your stores that sell anything with beauty products or personal care products. So we're going to take this and we're just going to take the end of it and wipe it down the side of our fletch. That cleans up that glue and allows us to kind of clean up our total arrow presentation. Too much glue just looks a little sloppy, and because we want to be awesome shots, we have to have awesome looking arrows. So my arrow is all cleaned up, and then kind of my last step here is I want to make sure that I don't have any arrows of that fletch or any spots on that fletch that kind of fold up, like there wasn't enough glue there when I put it down, or I didn't give that clamp enough time. So all I'm going to do is simply run my finger down the side of that fletch and look for places where it might fold up. So we did really good on that bloating blazer there. We also did really good on that mini X vein, and we did really good on our AE Max Stealth. So then we come back the other way just to double check, and usually if you've done one side well, you've done the other side well. So this is a completed arrow now. A little funky looking, but you guys are going to have either all three of the same color, or you're going to have two of one color and one of the other, or all three different colors, but hopefully you're fletching all of the same vein on that arrow. But if you guys ever have any questions about how to fletch or how to clean your arrows off if you've got fletchings on them, feel free to stop down. This is a great way to kind of get more into archery and do some stuff on your own. It helps you become much more in tune with how your bow is shooting, how your arrows are flying, and we're always more than happy to help answer any questions and steer you in the right direction.